Welcome to this episode of the Tron Church podcast. In this episode, we're thinking about some issues around parenting and families, and particularly how to make the most of Sundays, how to set Sunday and gathering with God's people as the pattern for our weeks. In the course of our discussions, I'm here with Paul Brennan. In the course of our discussions, we'll also hear a little bit from some of our parents, some parents in the church family who'll be sharing their experiences. So Paul, on Friday, you and I had gathered with a big group of parents to talk about making the most of Sundays. And you were really helpfully setting the ground for it. So what is the significance of church?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about what church is, and then also what the gathering of the church is. And I think it was helpful just to be reminded of the reality of it, because we quickly become used to the mundane and, church is what we do, don't really think about it. But just be able to step back for a minute and just remind ourselves of what the church is and how precious it is. So the church is the people of God. It's those who have been redeemed through the Lord Jesus, who are his family forever. And, there's the church invisible. That's all Christians all over the place throughout history. But there's also the church visible, which is what we see. It's the church gathered. And just how precious the church is in the sight of God. And also thinking about where the church is headed. So we read a bit from Revelation, looking forward to that day when we'll be gathered around the throne, worshipping him. There'll be folk from every tribe, tongue, nation. And that is what we're part of. The church is an institution that will never die out. It will last into eternity. And we are part of that. So just reminding ourselves of the church.
How glorious
it is, how big it is, how vast its eternal nature. So this isn't just a mundane gathering of folk who just happen to want to meet up.
It's not just a sort of efficient form of information processing and communication.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the church is really precious, and God in his grace has brought us into his family.
Yeah.
So it really is something to be treasured, and it's good just to think carefully about what it is, what the church is. So we thought a bit about that. We also thought about what happens as the church gathers. So that's what the church is. It's God's people, but we also gather every week. The Lord has commanded us to meet on the Lord's day, to not give up meeting together. So what's happening when we get together on a Sunday? And again, it can become routine,
humdrum,
normal. It's just what we do. But just thinking carefully about what happens when we are gathering together.
So what is happening when we're gathering together?
What is happening together? Well, we talked about it in a few ways. I mean, there's a lot we could say, but when we are gathering, we're gathering in the presence of God. So it's not just a sort of horizontal encounter. We're not just meeting with each other. We'll say more about that in a minute, but primarily we're meeting with the Lord. It's he who invites us to come. It is he who calls us. And as we gather, he draws near to us, and we are encountering him. So we're not just a church to be entertained or educated. You can often think about it in those terms. I'm coming to learn things about God. But actually, fundamentally, we're coming to encounter him. So that's why we do what we do on Sunday. That's why we open with God's word. He's calling us to come and sit under his words. We respond in praise. It's really encountering God. So what's happening is, it looks very ordinary, but it's actually supernatural. It's a unique gathering God's people. And as we gather, God really is in the midst. He really is speaking to us. And I think it's quite helpful to be reminded of that.
I sometimes take a little moment on a Sunday to look around and think, we're just in this ordinary room in a rainy city, and it looks like nothing special at all. And then to remember what is really happening, what the angels might be seeing as they watch us, that actually, we're gathering to God. and we're looking up for him to speak to us. It's a miraculous thing, really.
It is. It's supernatural. And yeah, one of the things I shared was, when we're at the center of what we do is God's word being preached. And it's helpful to think about what's happening as that's going on. When whoever it is, a normal guy is there, stood at the front preaching, what's actually happening. It's not just a horizontal moment.
He's not just talking about the Bible.
No. There is a message, and the message is a message from the Lord. So John Calvin, I'll read this little quote because it's quite good. John Calvin, he said that one of the most remarkable gifts that God has given is that he deigns to consecrate the mouths and tongues of men to his service, making his own voice heard in them. So actually, when we're sitting at church listening to the preaching, it's actually God is speaking to us through these very human words.
Yeah.
God is actually, as the Bible is being taught faithfully, God is there preaching. Paul talks about the same sort of thing in Ephesians. He's referring to his own preaching and teaching to the folk in Ephesus. But what he says is that Christ came and preached peace to you.
Yeah.
So it's not just me.
Yeah.
Actually, as I was doing that, it was Christ who was speaking to you. And so just thinking about that just revolutionizes how we conceive of Sundays and what's happening. It's phenomenal.
So Sundays and our gathering together, it's a deeply significant thing. Do you want to say any more about the significance of Sundays?
So Sundays, the gathering of the church, it's not just some idea that we've come up with. It's not just something that we as Christians think, oh, that'd be a nice thing to do. Actually, the Lord has designed the world and how we operate with a pattern, with a rhythm. The 6 days of creation, the day of rest, that's not just how it went. That is a pattern. That's a rhythm that the Lord has given to us for our good. So 6 days of work and then a day set aside, not for rest as in,
leisure.
Put your feet up and watch the rugby, although you might do that. But actually, it's a day set aside for the Lord and for him. And it's a great gift for us. It's for our good. So the rest of your week might be busy. Sunday isn't a sort of a day off to do what we like. It's a day set aside for the Lord and to gather with his people, to listen to his word, to respond to it. And that is very good for us.
Yeah.
And the Lord's designed it that way. And he's commanded us to not stop meeting together.
Now, that's obviously true for everybody, whether you're parents with children or not. Thank you. I'm happy to be reminded of all of that in my situation. But we were particularly thinking about families, parents with children at home still on Friday. So do you want to just play out some of the implications of what you've said for families who are shaping family life?
Yeah. So obviously the implications of what Sunday is and what the church is, there are implications for all of us, but particularly for families. Given what we said about church, given how special, unique, supernatural it is, how vital it is for our spiritual good, given that the Lord has given it to us as a gift for our benefit, given all that, what does that then look like for your family? So we were encouraging families to think about Sundays very deliberately. So not haphazardly, not, let's just see how things go. Rather than making decisions on church based on emotion, it's based on principle. So you determine what's our approach to Sunday is going to be, and we're going to do it. So I was encouraging folk to make church the center of your family's life. Make it the key central priority around which your week is based. So it's not something to fit in. No, actually, you start with Sunday. You start with the church gathering, and you build everything else around that, because that demonstrates what is the most important thing. And as a Christian, as a member of the church, gathering God's people in his presence must be the central thing of our week. So I would say make it a weekly routine, and you're there every week, apart from when you're, on holiday or whatever. But it's your weekly commitment, and be there as much as you can. So we have 2 services on a Sunday, so I'd, as much as possible, have your family at both those services. and make it a very positive, non-negotiable. So you're not apologising for it.
Yeah.
It's a positive thing.
Have there been any particular ways that you've made Sunday positive? Or have you, I don't know, maybe it just is positive, non-negotiable.
Yeah, I think just the experience of church is positive, and it's what I do. As one of the ministers, I'm there all the time, but that's been a huge benefit to the family. We are just there every week. We're there twice, and the kids love it. And particularly since we moved to the 5 o'clock, back in the days when it was 6:30, they wouldn't have been out because they were in bed at that point. But the 5 o'clock gives the opportunity for them to come, and they just love being there. So we don't need to go too hard on the sort of positive propaganda in terms of church. And I use the word
church is its own propaganda.
Church is its own propaganda. And I'd use propaganda in a very positive way. Like, if you're not propagandizing your children about the Lord and the goodness of the Lord and being one of his children, then something else would be.
It's what you were saying the other Sunday.
Indoctrination.
Indoctrination.
Yeah.
If you don't indoctrinate your children, indoctrination just means putting doctrine in.
Yep. Yeah, I wish I'd come up with that phrase.
That's you're
good.
very welcome.
I like that.
If we're not indoctrinating our children,
something else
is. Yeah.
But yeah, just being at church, the kids just really enjoy being there. I'm always there early, so we are there before the service starts, and that is a wonderful time for the kids to let off a bit of steam, run about, but also just see people and chat to folk, and it's just another moment for interaction. So I would say, sometimes it's just success being there. Like, you've got the kids out, you've made it to church, great.
One of the other dads said to me the other day, sometimes we just think, it's better to go late than not at all. And that's true.
It's true. But what I would encourage you to think about, if church really is the most important thing, if it's the most vital thing in your week, then why wouldn't you get there early? And that is a bit of a change in mindset. And if you are consistently arriving on the button or 5 minutes late, well, just shift your day 10 minutes early. I know I've got 4 kids. I know it's crazy, but you can just be a bit more deliberate and planned. But there's a real benefit to the kids. They love being there. And so we don't have to go too hard on bigging up church, because church bigs itself up.
Yeah.
And they love being there, they love seeing their friends, they love seeing older folk. It's just a happy environment. So.
And the older folk love seeing them.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah.
When Sinclair Ferguson became the minister and John Rushton became his assistant, Sinclair was really big in getting the children into church. He was really big in saying, let's get them into the evening service. Let the children know that they belong here, that they are part of this. And we looked at each other and we thought, there's something happening. I think we said, there's a bus leaving and we need to get on that. So the boys were 9 and 7 at the time, and we said to them, we're going to start coming to church with us. And they did. And I'm really thankful for the folk who did the Sunday nights. They put effort in. I still know some of them. And it was the Sunday nights for folk watching was a wee booklet so that the kids could scribble down something that they've learnt from the sermon. Quite often when we looked at what they scribbled down, didn't have much bearing on what the sermon was about. But that's okay, because church is different from any other meeting, sure it is. It's spiritual. And there's more going on than what they take in from the sermon. So a lot of our children saw was through their senses. They saw mum and dad singing. They heard God's word being spoken. They saw that we always prayed. And they saw the whole church doing that. And that speaks to them more for their age than what they'd learned from the sermon. And as I've been reflecting as well, I think what it does is it tells our children that they belong, that they're part of this church. If I'd been tempted to keep them out and let them come when they're older, I think subconsciously I'm saying, you're not really part of this yet. You need to grow up to become part of this. But by bringing them here on a Sunday, or by the parents now bringing their young kids here, then the kids just taking in, I belong here. Yeah. People speaking to them, not only my parents, but somebody says hello, they know me. I belong. And it's a blessing of being baptised and being part of the church, because you do, you belong.
Yeah. Your pattern was always twice on a Sunday, and that continued when you had kids. Is that not a burden on family life to give up so much of a Sunday?
Absolutely not. It's I think if it becomes a habit, if it's your routine, but more than that, I mean, obviously it's much more than a habit and more than a routine. It's we want to be there, we want to be learning, we want our children to be part of it and be with us. So although they always came in the morning with us, coming out at night, it initially was really exciting. It was exciting for the boys, and then Gemma, when she started coming around about the age of 3 or 4, and it was exciting for us to take them. So it was. But it can be hard work in a service as well, because you're not always able to fully focus on the sermon when they're young. You're keeping them on track, you're nudging them to wake up, or you're telling them to be quiet, or you're teaching them, you're training them how to behave in a church service as young an age as we possibly can. So, yeah.
I guess one of the things I was thinking of as well is that it's trying to get in my mind that church is the one day in 7 that we get to go to church. So I've got to work Monday to Saturday. God has designed it that way. But he says you get to come to worship on a Sunday. And by bringing your children, you're saying, you get to come. This is the bonus.
And the older they get, the more of church they get to be in as they grow up. Now that's our pattern now, is starting in creche, but growing up, and the older they are, the more of church they get to be part of. More of the main service they get to be part of.
And even being there for part of it, they're sensing it, and then they're saying, we now go to our church.
Yeah.
So that's a blessing to them.
Our Sunday wasn't, let's see where we can slot church into it. Our Sunday was, there are 2 services, and we're going to these 2 services. What else we fit in round about it is variable. Would maybe depend on the weather, where you would get out in the afternoon or not, but 2 services were the normal. And that's what we aimed for.
And I think it was interesting from one childhood, the church that my parents had attended and had taken me to as a child only had a morning service. And I have to say, when I look back on a Sunday, I found Sundays really, really boring. It was fine in the morning because you were going to church and you were going to Sunday school, but then you would go home, and we were old enough that TV was pretty rubbish. In fact, it was non-existent until well into a Sunday afternoon. And the stuff they had on, I just found really depressing, and there was nothing really else to look forward to. So in actual fact, when I became old enough to actually, and my brother and I started attending a church where, well, the church we went to, eventually when Jean and I met, where there was 2 services, and it was just a delight to be able to go morning and evening, and that's what Sunday was about. It was being with God's people, listening to God's word being preached. And that was, that was so important.
I think likewise we have to be realistic in that when you go to church with children, it's not going to be easy. And if everybody else's children seem to sit for an hour and never move off the chair, and yours are swinging from the lights by the time the first hymn started, it's hard work. And sometimes you think, is this a good idea? But again, you're forming that pattern of church is where we should be. And yes, sometimes it's a bit of a challenge. No, it's probably a bit of a challenge all the time. But you just keep going.
Can you think of any other ways in which your kids' attitude to church has been formed?
I mean, we do speak well of it. So we do speak positively of church. We do talk about the joys of it. So we are positive when we talk about it at home. We talk about people, obviously a lot, people in the church. We have people from church in our home.
What do the kids make of that?
The kids love it. So we will try and have folk regularly for Sunday lunch and other points in the week. It's not every week. We kind of go through phases and seasons. But, if we put on a run of having folk on Sunday and then we don't have them, if there's a week off, the kids start complaining because it's boring. It's just mum and dad. Who's coming? Where are the guests?
That? Yeah.
So they really enjoy having folk in the house. It's great hosting because the kids just entertain our guests. So Steph and I can just get the food out.
And the guests are entertaining your kids for a Sunday afternoon as well. It's a win-win, isn't it?
So it's good, and it's just a good time to get to know folk informally. So I would urge you to do it. It can be a bit of a thought, hosting folk on a Sunday, because it's a busy day, but I would say do simple food. Don't make it too... So we have the same thing most Sundays.
Well, what is it?
We have sausage chili.
We're getting into menu prep and recipes and everything now.
We have sausage chili, which is very simple.
It's very good. Yeah, chili con carne is one of my go-tos as well.
Yeah. It's so easy. I can go to the shop without a list and I know what to get. I can walk in, buy the ingredients without a list. That's how simple it is.
That is.
And it takes 15 minutes to prep. So it's something simple. The kids like it. Hopefully our guests like it. So that's what we do.
Our children's attitudes to come into church, it was formed because it was what we did. We brought them. So they came at a young age. But also, I think the way we spoke about church in the house, it was positive. There wasn't any negativity around going. It wasn't a hardship to go. It wasn't difficult. It was a rush in the morning sometimes. I'm not saying it was like, but it wasn't. It was never up for discussion. It was something that we did, and the children just accepted it. They never thought to say, well, why do we go or why do we not go? When they were really young, that wasn't a discussion because it was just what they did. It was the same as going to school or going to bed at night. It was just natural. It was normal. And I think because they witnessed that we were really loving going to church, and any time they would have heard us talking about it, that we would have been chatting about the sermon or whatever. So they've heard positive things. So I think that was a big thing in how it was formed.
I guess one of the things that your kids automatically pick up on is, what do my parents really enjoy? What are they big in? So my boys grew up knowing that Dad loves the Rangers. Dad watches the Rangers. Dad reads the reports on the Rangers. So unsurprisingly, my kids grew up as big Rangers supporters. I remember watching one of the semi-finals, and we were standing behind the couch because we couldn't sit down. We were that nervous. Score, score, score. So I guess the point of that is that our kids will breathe in what we breathe out. So in the same way, they'll pick up what sort of music you like and what team you support and what rugby team you watch, or if you're into guitars, they'll pick that up. So if church becomes big to you, if they see that my mum and dad love being at church, that they love reading God's word, that it will say to them, that's what mum and dad like, therefore I will go in that way too.
Yeah.
That just happens.
Yeah.
That's natural. And likewise, if we give out that church is not something, or the church is difficult, I need to go, they'll pick up on that equally as well. So it's really important we say, well, we've got the 6 days and I need to do these things the 6 days, but on Sunday, I get to go to church. That's big for me. In the same way, I would say, that's a big game tonight. We're watching this. They'll pick up, church is big, let's go.
I think practically, it's preparing for Sunday starts on Saturday. And from my own point of view, I just liked on Saturday to get rid of some of the things that sometimes slow you down on a Sunday morning. For instance, we'd decide who was going to wear what, not because they wore really special clothes, but it just saved the whole conversation of what am I going to wear? Is it trainers or wellies or whatever? And we'd set them all out on Saturday night, and that was what was going on Sunday. We'd also start on Saturday night and say, right, let's set the table for breakfast. Nothing special, but let's decide what cereal we're having. Let's put plates out. And then it meant that when we got up on Sunday morning, it was all ready to go.
And you built a bit of anticipation for Sundays.
That's right, because we didn't necessarily do that during the week. So something exciting's happening, therefore we're going to prepare for it. So that was something that we would do. Clothes out at the ready, shoes out at the ready, and breakfast set and ready to go. We didn't have anything special to eat at breakfast on a Sunday, but the only special thing on a Sunday was we tended to have a jelly rabbit when we had lunch. So the jelly rabbit mould would come out, we'd make a jelly in it, and then on Sunday it was a big debate as to which child had the nose and which child had the tail. And when there was only 2 children, it alternated. Once there was 3 children, it got a bit more complicated.
And tell us what you gave your grown-up children recently for a birthday.
Well, we were talking about this jelly rabbit last year. So my 2 older children had said that they always felt they had been done out of the rabbit tail, which was the good bit. So last year for their birthdays, they both got a jelly rabbit mould and some jelly in their 40s. And they now make jelly rabbits in their own houses.
I think that's what the internet calls a core memory.
Yes.
We talk quite a lot about come to church twice on a Sunday for those who can.
Yeah.
What would you say to parents for whom that's not yet their pattern, but are contemplating it? Any advice?
Well, I think if at this point you're not out on a Sunday night with the family, I would at least have one of the parents go themselves. It may be that you're not in a pattern of going at all. I would encourage you to go. One of you will take it in turns and just see what's going on. And
that's my memory when I was a child. My dad was a minister as well,
Yeah.
so he was always out on a Sunday evening.
Yep.
That spoke.
Yeah. So establishing a pattern where one of you's out. I think what you'll observe is a very happy, joyful place to be. I love Sunday evening services, and having been there and seen it and seen the other families, you think, well, let's give it a go. Let's try it. And what you will probably find is your kids come and they love it and they will pester you to come back.
Oh.
Certainly, there's occasions where whatever's going on in life, maybe they've not been well, and we say, no, you're staying home tonight. Cue protest. Because they want to be there. Yeah. So that's great. But I think once your kids come along and see it, they enjoy it, they run about, our kids come home, the boys are beetroot and sweating.
There is definitely a feature of sweaty-haired boys.
There is, and consuming huge amounts of juice, and it's great. The kids love it.
Yeah. One family I was chatting with who would regularly come at 5 p.m. and when their kids were a bit younger, they were sort of debating it, and they were often tired and a bit more tired on a Monday morning, and then they just thought, why isn't it much better that they have a slightly bad Monday morning at school and have been at church than that they miss church and have a good Monday morning at school? Yeah,
again, that's a question of priorities, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're not for a moment saying education and school's not important, but it's not as important as church and being with the Lord's people.
And we do know different families are different kids are different, etc.
Yeah, I think as I said on Friday evening, the 5 p.m. wasn't an option for us early on, but if it had been, there's probably phases in life where we wouldn't have gone.
Yeah.
Or, when the kids were very small, you got young kids, it's just not feasible at times. So I think you've got to remember there are seasons of life, there are phases you go through. So we don't want to load people with guilt. Make it a goal, but there's just life happens and there are phases and seasons. But certainly you want to make it a long-term goal that you get your families to church.
That frames your Sunday. We were saying just around Christmas, weren't we? There was a couple of Sundays where we don't have an evening service, and I felt like Sunday stopped when I got home, whereas in the middle of the day. rather than continuing into the evening.
Yeah.
I really missed it.
Yeah. There was some, you had a book available on Friday from J.C. Ryle, and there's some little nuggets of gold. I'll just share one because it's really helpful. So this was written 130 years ago, but it's addressed to parents, the duties of parents. And he says this at one point: don't feel downcast because your children do not see the full value of church as a means of grace now. Simply train them up to a regular habit of regular attendance. Establish it in their minds as a high, holy, and important part of their lives. If we do this, then the day will very likely come when they will bless you for it.
It's great.
So even though now it may not be easy, there'll come a day when they'll thank you.
Yeah. If you want to read any books, the inevitable book plug, we recommend a book by, is it by your old Sunday school teacher? Fruitful
Yes,
Home by Anne Benton.
Anne Benton. So she was my Sunday school teacher.
Would that be right?
Yeah.
It's an excellent book. We send that to all new parents, but also Duties of Parents by J.C. Ryle is excellent.
Yep,
also.
I recommend.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul.
No worries.